1, 2, New Orleans, 2, 3, 4. The wreck of the good ship in New Orleans. The wreck of the good ship in New Orleans. The wreck.
I respect you. I care about you. I want you to have a good life. All right, I just recorded for about 5 minutes, not realizing that I didn't hit the record button. I turned on my receiver for my sound. I made sure this was on. I started talking. I forgot to look at the screen and didn't see the red bars. And so, yeah, I'm stupid. But anyway, here I am. And hopefully I'm in focus. And for those who care, I'm using the original Panasonic S5. I'm using a Minolta Rocore 35mm f2.8, all manual. And I'm out here in the world, and there's a lot of construction going on behind me. So there's going to be a lot of noise. There's trains going by. There's going to be jackhammers. It's going to be really kind of weird. But I thought, you know, sometimes I'm out and about in the world, and I think, why should I hide that I'm out and about in the world? Like, things happen. Sometimes you set up in a spot where it looks pretty good. Like, that's the Poughkeepsie Pedestrian Bridge, which is an awesome bridge that you can walk over from Poughkeepsie, New York to Highland, New York. And there's the jackhammer. I don't know if you could hear it. Maybe this thing has some kind of a limiter or something like that, but I don't know. This is a Hollyland Lark Max. What am I talking about today? I wanted to include this in the video that I shot over the last couple of days, because that video was talking about stuff that is relevant to this, but in a kind of disconnected way. But I'm going to connect it, because no matter what you're dealing with in terms of lights or, you know, sound equipment or camera equipment or lenses, or whether you're trying to learn your ISO settings or your white balance settings or how to use a camera in general, you are becoming fucking paralyzed. I write every single day of my life. Every day I write. And so because I do stuff every day, I don't get so attached to anything. I'm attached to all of it, you know, but I'm not so attached that it's like, oh, that's my baby, I'm so worried about. Like, no, I'm just working all the time. And I'm always thinking about what I'm doing next. Get yourself out of this thing that's having you like stuck in quicksand, where you can't move your legs and you can't move your arms. You're like strapped in, you just can't move. You have like a thing around your mouth, you can't talk. You got a blindfold on, you can't see, you can't do anything. Don't make one project your life's project. Keep it moving. You're watching all these videos. I mean, how many videos you really need to watch before you understand how to set your ISO settings or how to set your white balance? I mean, it's easy. Like, watch 3 or 4 videos and then practice, because until you practice, it's never going to look good. I'm shooting manual right now. I always shoot manual. I don't even think about autofocus, but sometimes I do think about it. Like recently I thought, you know, maybe I should sell all my shit and get a Panasonic GH7. Because then I'll have autofocus and everything else that I love. I've now worked with the GH5. I see no difference between micro four thirds and full frame other than bokeh. And I don't really care about that kind of bokeh. Like that extreme kind of bokeh is good for, well, you know what? I can get that extreme bokeh just by getting close enough to the lens. It's really not about the sensor. It's about how close you get to the lens. I could completely wipe out the background on my GH5. Like, even though you understand the settings and you understand how it works, it's never going to look good until you start to get out there and practice, okay? So what you're doing is you're paralyzing yourself. You're thinking, oh my God, I can't start this YouTube channel. I can't make a film. I can't do anything until I figure out my gear. Like, I need this. Like, this is the foundation to my life. Like, what camera do I need? What lenses are right for me? What focal lengths do I need? What kind of aperture am I looking for? Am I a nature shooter, or am I doing portraits, or I'm making films, or what am I doing? At the end of the day, for me, it's all about how it makes you feel. You know, what it does to your heart, to your soul, how it makes your mind think about other things. It disrupts you, you know, from your day to day, and it just impacts you in a way that art only can. you know? And sometimes it's like really intangible, like you can't really explain it. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Meaning the equipment doesn't matter. And you know what? Get the best equipment that you can afford. I mean, of course, gear does matter to a certain extent, but almost all the gear that you would buy today is going to be fine. You could buy an old Blackmagic OG camera that's like this big, and it's awesome. You know, whatever you get, you're going to get used to it, and you're going to learn how to use it. So learn the basics, get your foundation down, learn all those settings I talked about, get a camera, get used to it, master it. But here's the thing that you really need to do to get you out of your paralysis, this thing that's like keeping you in this cult of just watching video after video after video about cameras and lenses and lights and sound equipment and all this bullshit that means absolutely nothing. I am kind of a tech nerd, even though much more of a storyteller. Like, I don't care. You can give me any camera. I mean, I made a feature film on my phone, so I don't really care. But I love messing with lights. I love learning about light, how to shape it and how to use it. You know, like I love the way it looks behind me right now. You know, I love working with composition. I mean, I love to try to make every frame look like a painting when I'm working. What you need to do is write a script, come up with a story. You need to contribute because, you know, now more than ever, at least in my lifetime, which is going to cover most of your lifetimes, we need stories. We need contributions from people. We need to hear how people feel about what's going on in the world, because the world is in complete chaos right now. There's like wars and genocides and political uprisings and coups and people losing their democracy and people disagreeing and people losing friends over this, and like so much shit is going on. I have a play called Brooklyn Quartet. There are 4 characters in it. Queen, who's a little child who was killed when she was a baby. But then there's Saint, a black boy, Jamal, his name is white boy named Jamal, he's a white kid who's named Jamal, and a Latina, Esther Alvarez, who's part Dominican, part Jewish. And my hope when I wrote this play was that everybody would see a little piece of themselves in each of those characters. In other words, even if you're a man, you're going to see pieces of you in Esther Alvarez. Even if you're a woman, you're going to see parts of you in Jamal. Even if you're white, you're going to see parts of yourself in Saint. Because it's all about empathy. Because at the end of the day, we're all the same. And so instead of being somebody on social media who's just like banging people over the head with stuff, or, you know, sliding into people's direct messages and shaming them for not feeling the way you think they should feel, instead of doing all of that, take all of this stuff and turn it into something beautiful. And I say that all the time. It's like a beautiful sunny day. It's like a beautiful cloudy day where the sky's all dramatic and dark and moody. It's beautiful. It's like, you know, a father walking with his daughter, you know, and you see this big body holding hands with this tiny little person down the street. It's beautiful. You know, it's like seeing a whole family sharing dinner together at some restaurant and laughing, and you see the little kids and you see the elders, and it's beautiful. Life is beautiful. But I'm going to keep saying it because I believe in it so much. Turn everything that's going on in this world into something beautiful. Take all the difficult things, take the controversial things, take the things that are making you lose your friends, lose your family, taking the things that are making you lose your sleep, that are fucking up your life, and turn them into something beautiful and make it a metaphor. You know, turn it into a script. I love storytelling. I love developing characters. I love making up a story. I love taking difficult things and turning them into something really engaging and beautiful, so that we're kind of immersed in this fantasy, but it's like reminding us of things that are happening in the real world. Like, how about, I'll give you an example. When I was a little kid, I was friends with this girl. I was like 6 years old, and I was over at her house one day, and I was at dinner with her family. This was in the Bronx, and this was a person who was a friend of my grandmother's, and this was a native family. The mother was Native American, the father was black. The girl was like this beautiful collaboration of the two of them, let's put it like that. So anyway, she was a good friend of mine. We used to run around together in the courtyard of my grandmother's building with these other 2 twin brothers, and I'm at the house, and it is 3 days before Thanksgiving. And I don't even know why I remember it was 3 days, but it was 3 days before Thanksgiving. And her father asked me what we're doing for Thanksgiving. And I was like, I don't know. I don't even care about Thanksgiving. I'm 6, you know. Anyway, that was the day in my life that Thanksgiving and Columbus Day changed forever, because that girl's mother, who is Native American, told me the way this country was born, told me what Thanksgiving really is, told me what Columbus Day is about, like told me all of this stuff from her perspective. But she didn't say it with like hatred or vitriol or anger or bitterness or any of that. She just said to me, honey, sometimes the history that you learn in school is not quite the way it was. Sometimes people like to make things look better than they actually are, because it's easier for a young child like you to absorb it, to understand, because if you notice, most of the people here kind of look like you or look like my husband, but they're not like me. And so I'm kind of the real minority. Now again, I was six. And of course, being the person who told my father that he was racist when I was 5, I was that kid. I came home and I told my parents that story, and Thanksgiving was forever different for me. It didn't ruin it, because I still loved gathering with my family, gathering with friends, having this, this time where people would get around a table and my grandmother would tell stories and make everybody laugh, and my father would tell stories, and it was always a fun time. But I also had kind of a sadness about it. I had an understanding, and I learned that life is not always so cut and dry, that life can also be many things true at the same time. Like I could be having a great time with my family, and I could be having Thanksgiving and watching football and all the celebrations, but also understand the pain and the history that it meant for other people, and have empathy for them and acknowledge it. And also, being who I was when I was a little kid, and still to this day, bring it up at the table and make other people talk about it as well. You could write a story like that. I'm an activist. I feel very strongly. I mean, I'm a liberal person. You would probably look at me as a progressive, but I'm not somebody who's going to like beat you over the head with that. I mean, I have another story. When I was in first grade, my teacher, anybody who's seen my play Broke Wide Open will know this story, but most of you haven't seen that play. Anyway, in first grade, my teacher said, children, tomorrow we're taking our class photo. And so I would like all of you to write something down that's really important to you. And I'm going to print it out and include it with all the photos, because this way when you get older, you're not only going to be able to see what you look like when you were 5 years old, but you're also going to have a good idea of what you were thinking about, like who you were as a kid at that time, like how you were expressing yourself verbally as well. Now, I'm paraphrasing, of course. I don't know if she talked to us like that, but I know that she said, write down something that was important to you. So she said, bring it in tomorrow. We'll share it with the whole class. So we go in the next day, and of course I'm last because I'm Wilk, and Wilk is always last. We're in alphabetical order. The whole class goes, and people wrote things like, I want to be a fireman when I grow up, girls stink, whatever. I want to be a baseball player, the Yankees are the greatest, stuff like that. So finally she gets to me and she's like, Rock, what did you write? And I wrote, I am a person and so are you. And the class kind of laughed a little bit, and she goes, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means that I think everybody should be treated the same. And, I don't think that you treat everybody the same in this class, because I notice every time something bad happens in the class, you blame my friend Cleveland for doing it, even if I did it, and I think you do that because he's black. And the whole class starts laughing. And then I say, and also, I notice that you don't treat Louise very, very kindly, like you don't treat her as nicely as you treat everybody else. And I think that's because she's fat. And now the class is just in an uproar of laughter, and the teacher is like, children, stop it. And she looks at me and she goes, young man, you wait for me after school. We're taking you to the principal's office. I'm calling your mother into school. I have a motto in my life, and excuse my French, although I do curse a lot, but my motto is let a motherfucker live. Like, if somebody believes in something that you don't believe in, and it has nothing to do with your life, and it doesn't affect your life, why do you even care? Why are you trying to stop somebody else from being a certain kind of way, looking a certain kind of way, loving a certain kind of way? What does that even have to do with you? I don't understand that. They're not trying to stop you from believing what you believe. They're not trying to force you to do what they're doing, to be what they're being. They're not trying to change you at all. Why are you trying to change them? I don't understand that. Now, when I was a little kid, I was adopted, right? I thought there was a baby store. I don't know, I came up with this idea one day, and of course my parents just let me go with it. My father especially is like, oh yeah, there's a baby store, you know. I guess he didn't want to give me the story of adoption or foster care or whatever, so I thought people went to the store and bought a baby, you know. So all day, I am like petrified. I'm thinking, I'm in trouble, I'm going to the principal's office, I did something bad, I'm gonna get returned to the baby store. Like they're gonna get a refund from me or whatever. And so anyway, the whole day goes by. My mother comes to school. I'm sitting in the principal's office with the teacher, the principal, and my mother, because my father was working. And my mother worked too, by the way. She had a little book route that she sold books. She was kind of an entrepreneur, but that's a whole nother issue. But anyway, the principal goes, all right, Ms. Zydeco, why are we here? Like, why'd you call us in here? She goes, well, today, you know, I had asked the class yesterday to write something down because we were taking our class photos today, and I wanted everybody to share something that I was going to include with their photos. And anyway, she tells the whole story, and she said, and Rock wrote, I am a person and so are you. And when I asked him what it meant, he said, and by the way, I am a person and so are you was one word, because I was like that as a kid. I was a creative little boy. But anyway, she goes, when I asked him what it meant, he said he thinks everybody should be treated the same. And he said that I didn't treat his friend Cleveland the same, that I blamed him for everything. And he said that I did it because he was black. He accused me of doing that because he was black. And my mother's looking at me like rolling her eyes like, oh, geez. It's really interesting. Storytelling is an amazing thing. It's like you have to be a good communicator. It's like having a good relationship, a good healthy relationship. If you can't communicate, you can't have a good relationship. If you can't communicate, you can't have a good movie. You can't have a good play. You're not up there to be tricky. You know, you might be able to be as creative as you can, and you don't have to be so literal, and you could be filled with metaphor and stuff like that, but it has to have a point. You know, there has to be something to it. And she said also he accused me of treating Louise poorly because she was fat. And my mother's just giving me the look of doom, and I'm like, oh my God, I am definitely going back to the baby store. Everything should move the story forward to get you to that ending that you're trying to get to, the payoff, the problem solved, the resolution to all that conflict, all these issues healed. So anyway, teacher looks at my mother, looks at the principal, it's total silence. She goes, Mrs. Wilk, I've had all day to think about this, and I just wanted to say in front of you and Mr. Romanson, the principal, and in front of Rock, that he's right. He was right. And Mrs. Wilk, if you'd like me to be fired, I would totally understand that. Mr. Romanson, like, what kind of teacher have I been? I've been a horrible person. I mean, I just feel like I've let you down. And Rock, I just want to tell you that what you did today was the right thing. You're a very special young man, and whenever you think something is wrong, you should never not speak out. You did the right thing, and I apologize to you. It's a true story. And I haven't shut up since. And can you imagine what that woman did for me? You can't really explain what it feels like when Miles Davis plays one note, or John Coltrane plays something like something instrumental, and it makes you feel something. Like there are no words that can reproduce that. It's just a feeling. And it's the same thing with the visual aspect of filmmaking, like choosing lenses, choosing aperture, what's going to be blurry, what's not going to be blurry, what's going to be in the foreground, what's going to be in the background, what's going through the frame, you know, what colors are you going to use? Is it light or dark? Do you want the blacks crushed, or do you want to see the shadows? Do you want to blow out the highlights on purpose, or do you want to save them? Like, it's so cool to think about why you're going to do that and what that has to do with the story, because every decision that you make should have something to do with the story. Now, why am I telling this story? I'm telling this story because there are books being banned on Black history in places like Florida and Texas and other places in the South. Like, we're going through something in this country where we're not allowing real history to be taught to our children. It's like we just want to whitewash the whole country. And I'm not trying to inject my politics to you or anything like that, but I'm just saying, it's like you can tell a story like my story with Ms. Zydeco, and it's a heartwarming story about a woman who empowers a young boy, you know, and it turns out to be a beautiful story, an uplifting story, an inspiring story. But it also is kind of a reminder of what's happening right now in the world, and how if we lived in a different country, like if I lived in Russia when I was 5 years old, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have been in trouble. That never would have happened, you know? You should be able to justify every choice that you make. I learned that from Stephen Bishop Seeley, my first director, you know, who never told me to do anything, but he just asked me question after question, and I had to justify every word in my script. And if I couldn't justify it, we cut it. In my first play, he cut what I thought was the best part of the play. But because I was new and I trusted him, and I cut it, and he was so right. It wasn't necessary. But it was what I thought at that time was the strongest part. And so that I used it another time, and I made another play based on that section. I had a good friend in high school, my best friend growing up, who has passed away since, my friend Gene Giles. I was at his house for dinner one night with his family. I used to hang out with his family all the time. And his grandfather taught me about something called the Green Book. Now, there was a movie called Green Book by Peter Farrelly, the Farrelly brothers, who made Dumb and Dumber, by the way, but this is a whole different kind of movie than that. And the Green Book is something that black people used to warn them about places that they should not go to throughout the South. Restaurants, hotels, places like that. It was a place to keep them safe. And there was a movie made about this. And so I was told about it. And of course, I came home and I told my parents about it. And so this was years ago. This is when I was in high school. You know, Green Book actually won the Academy Award for Best Picture. And so that's a perfect example of making art and raising awareness to something that is so important. Like, have you ever heard of the Green Book? Have you ever heard that in your life? Even though it was Best Picture, you might have heard that it was Best Picture, but you probably thought it was about a green book or Shrek or something like, you know, a book that Shrek read or something like that. But it was a book raising awareness to something. And even though the movie was kind of poorly done, and from the perspective of these white eyes, I don't think they really served it well. I think their intentions were really perfect, and I think it accomplished its goal, put it that way. The movie could have been done better, could have been more respectful to the main character. But what I'm saying is that Peter Farrelly created art that was a metaphor for a lot of things happening in this country where we're not teaching the proper history. We're not sharing the right things. I do Q&As after every show, whether it's a movie or a theater piece. I always do a Q&A with the audience to talk about it because I feel like that's my opportunity. Like, I get people from all different walks of life who come see my work. And I think it's because I'm not somebody who just does this fact-based kind of work that, you know, is like my way or the highway. Like, I'm not like that, you know? But I am somebody who stands up for injustice every single time. And I have zero tolerance for racism, xenophobia, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, like anti-Semitism. Like, I got no tolerance for any of it. And so I guess I'm saying all this to say, don't get stuck focusing on what camera, what lens, what sound, what do you do in your studio? You can't do it. You can't afford to go to a separate space. Like, all that is bullshit. But I'm not going to be a politician. I'm not going to just be an activist standing on a street corner screaming at you. I'm going to take all of that stuff and all that anger inside of me, and I'm going to turn it into something that's going to make you fucking cry and make you laugh and make you consider, make you think about humanity, which includes everybody, all of us. You know, get what you can afford, use your phone, do whatever, but write a script. Get out a little journal, get a little booklet that you like to carry around with a pen and paper, you know, with a pen, or use your tablet, or use your phone, or carry your laptop around. Write a script, get involved with stories. Think about stories that have happened in your life. Make up stories. Think about things that are important to you. Write a story about Gaza and Israel. Write a story about what's going on in the Middle East and have some empathy. And it's very spiritual to me when I'm thinking about a story and I'm thinking in terms of what lens I think would work best. And also, I love thinking about the challenge of possibly shooting something with only one lens, with only one focal length. Like Roger Deakins' 1917, you know, just using one focal length and like one long shot for an entire film. It's become one of my favorite films. I've watched it like 15 times. I've watched it a bunch of times without sound, just because I'm just amazed at how it looks and how they pulled that off. There are so many different points of view, and one thing you should know is that just when you think you know, you don't know shit. None of us know anything until we start to investigate stuff. And then all we can do is inject as much as we learn so that we can ask even more questions. Because life is so complicated, people are so complicated, but we have to, as artists, bring each other together by dealing with these difficult issues and turning them into these beautiful things like films, YouTube videos, books, plays, whatever. The great artists are the ones who are willing to open up the window to their soul, to really let people in, to let people know them, like to really know who they are through their work. Like not like telling you, this is where I went to high school, this is what I like to eat. No. It's by their performance, by opening up that intimacy and connecting with people on a very visceral level. Write a script. It'll break you from your paralysis and it'll get you moving and it'll make you feel like you're doing something good, like you're doing something important, because the thing is, what you're really doing right now is you're creating a barrier to your entry point to being creative. You're like creating this scenario that is actually literally stopping you from doing the things that you want to do, whatever you want to share. You can't do what I do. You can't make that play. You can't do these movies. You can't feel the way you feel without me, the way I make you feel. Now maybe you can get it from somebody else. And so just from my perspective, I think if you focus on the stories, focus on the things that you want to share, the stuff that you want to kind of point out to the world, your opinion, without being holier than thou, without being pejorative, without being judgmental, thinking about everybody's perspective. You know, put yourself in other people's shoes. I'll say it again, have some empathy. That's the most important thing you do. And the byproduct is, it'll break you of this paralysis. It'll empower you to just kind of realize that all this stuff that we're using, this camera that I have, this lavalier mic, this, you know, the lights that we use, this tripod, like all this stuff is just like, it's such a tiny little part of the equation. Yeah, I've thought about upgrading to the Panasonic S5 II or the 2X, but why would I do that other than autofocus? I don't need all those codecs. I don't need 8K. I don't even need OpenGate, although OpenGate might help me. OpenGate, but I could kind of shoot OpenGate in a way, because I could put this camera in anamorphic mode and I don't need to use an anamorphic lens, and then I'm shooting in 4:3, and that's almost the whole sensor. And so it kind of does give me more vertical room to play with, and so it's not OpenGate, but it's more than what I have. And then, you know, once you start to progress, you can go back to the gear and think about, you know, oh, I work a lot in low light, so maybe I should get a full frame camera, or I like to deal more with, you know, my aperture and the blurry background and what's in the foreground and what's in the background, stuff like that. Like, then you could start to do that. But what you need to do first is get in the game, you know, get yourself out of this thing that's having you like stuck in quicksand where you can't move your legs and you can't move your arms. You're like strapped in, you just can't move. You have like a thing around your mouth, you can't talk, you got a blindfold on, you can't see, you can't do anything. But you're creating that, you're stopping yourself. So stop that, cut it out, get to work.
New Orleans. The wreck of the good ship New Orleans.